Hey, LinkedIn, and welcome to Business Unusual. This is a live show where we talk about coronavirus and the way it is impacting the way we work. I am Susie Jackson. I am an editor at LinkedIn, coming to you from my home in New York City. As always, on the show today, I want to hear from you. Drop your comments in as we are talking into the stream. Use the hashtag Business Unusual. Let us know what you are thinking, what is going on wherever you are, and wherever you're joining us from today. Today, we're going to talk about something really important, really timely, and crucial for so many people across the country. We're going to be talking about small business lending. The latest programs were released last week as part of the $2 trillion stimulus package. Applications opened on Friday. We're seeing a lot across LinkedIn from people on both ends of this, from people who are small business owners trying to figure out their way through the system, from people on the lending side who are also trying to figure out how to operate in this new normal at a really quick pace. Later in the show, or shortly in the show, our LinkedIn small business editor, Jordan Dahl, will join us. She's going to be talking about these programs, the differences between them, taking your questions, trying to help you if you are in a small business and you're trying to figure out your way through this really uncertain time. We will also be joined by Mike Malloy. He is a professor at Georgetown and also runs a startup incubator. He's been looking into this issue a lot. He will be here also to field your questions. We want to help you through this time and get through it as calmly and as quickly as possible. There is a lot of uncertainty. There's a lot of confusion about what help is available and how to obtain it. And it's hugely important that we figure this out together because millions of businesses have been forced to close across the country during this coronavirus pandemic. We want to hear from you. We want to take your questions in the stream. Are you a small business owner? Have you applied for these loans already? Are you struggling to do that? Are you trying to figure out how to make your way through? Where do you apply for? What are the rules? What's the timing? What's the amount? It can be a little bit overwhelming. What do you want to know about these programs? We'll be taking your questions for Jordan and for Mike. Already joining us in the stream, I see some small business owners. Welcome. Hello. Thank you for being here. I hope you're able to share some questions with us as we go along so we can try to help each other through this. We are already seeing some comments on LinkedIn from small business owners. We have Paul saying this is really a lifesaver. He owns a marketing company in Hawaii, says that he's applied for the small business disaster assistance and feels that it's the difference between exhausting all of their savings to stay afloat for the next few months or having a chance to weather this storm, the COVID-19 storm, for a little bit. So Paul is finding this to be helpful so far, has gotten that application in and really feels that it's going to be a lifeline for the business. There are other people trying to apply and we're seeing different experiences. Gregory is a real estate private equity person in New York, and he says none of his banks were able to process on the day he left this comment. He said they're still trying to digest the new guidelines. And as he was typing this comment, Gregory himself was trying to figure out these guidelines as well. So there's a lot to sort through. We're hoping to sort through some of that together. We are also hearing from Michael on LinkedIn, who runs a training camp in Nebraska. Michael, with a lengthy comment, is giving a summary of his experience trying to apply for some of these loans. He's got timestamps. You can tell this is a detail-oriented person who's really trying to wade through all of this new stuff, all this paperwork. He says the process has been good, though. Having said that, he does admit that he has had no fewer than 15 phone calls over the past couple of weeks with all of his financial advisors, his banker, his accountant, and his actual financial advisor. They are on the website every day trying to figure out what the guidance is and how they can best navigate the system swiftly and efficiently. Right before I bring on my colleague, Jordan Dahl, our small business editor, I want to check the stream really quickly. I already see a couple of questions. I see a question from David who says, we applied last Monday but haven't heard anything. What happened to the 3-day turnaround? That's something that we can talk about when Jordan comes on, and Mike later as well. And James is saying, can I apply at multiple banks and just take the first one that gets back to me? So I'm really happy to already see these questions coming in. This is exactly what we want to hear today. We want to know where you're at and how we might help. So with that, I'd love to bring on Jordan. Jordan Dahl is the LinkedIn small business editor. She is joining us from San Francisco. Jordan, good morning.
Good morning. Hi, Susie.
Thank you so much for joining us. As you can see from some of the comments that we're pulling, people are along different roads with this experience. Some are finding it pretty easy to navigate. Some questions in the stream, people are saying that they've started the process, but they're wondering what's going on. Can you tell us about what programs are available to just kind of start us off in the same place?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's a little bit confusing. There are two programs that are currently available. So one is a disaster loan, and this was made available a couple of weeks ago. This was amongst the first round of stimulus that was made available. And it is $2 million of disaster loans to businesses that have been impacted by coronavirus. So these are non-forgivable loans. There is a 3.75% interest rate for small businesses and 2.75% for nonprofits. However, there is also a $10,000 grant tied to this. So when you first apply for that loan, you can immediately apply for the grant, and that $10,000 does not need to be paid back. However, this is still a non-forgivable loan. The other program that most people are familiar with and what people are desperately trying to put in their applications for is called the Payment Protection Program. And that is the $350 billion that was included as part of the stimulus package signed by President Trump a week ago. And so those loans were made available on Friday, but there's still quite a bit of confusion around this. So these can be forgivable. The details around that surround your employment. And so your payroll costs, your utility bills, your mortgage payments, your rent, this can all be included in that as forgivable. However, 75% of the loan amount that you take out needs to go toward payroll costs in order for this loan to be converted into a grant. The requirements are pretty low in terms of who can apply: small businesses with fewer than 500 employees, nonprofits with fewer than 500 employees, the self-employed, freelancers, contractors, solo proprietors. They really tried to make this available to as many people as possible.
Okay, Jordan. So I'm hearing you talk about two main programs, the disaster loan with the grant and the Paycheck Protection Program. Can you just simplify what is the difference between these two things?
The main difference is that one is forgivable and the other is not.
Okay.
So the disaster loan is not forgivable, but does come with that $10,000 grant. The Paycheck Protection Program, PPP, is forgivable under certain conditions, but you'll want to talk through those conditions with your lender and make sure that you can meet them before you take out this loan.
Okay, Jordan, I'm taking notes here because I think we might get into some jargon-heavy talk here and with some of these questions. So a PPP is a Paycheck Protection
Program.
Paycheck Protection Program. PPP. What other acronyms do we need to know for this chat? PPP, and is there one for the other one too?
And EILD.
EILD. And what does that stand for?
That stands for the Economic Injury Loan Disaster. But most places are referring to this as the disaster loan, including the SBA.
Okay, so we have the disaster loan and the PPP. So we might have to come back to that. I might need some reminders on that. I hope that our small business
that part of it has led to all the confusion. There's a lot of jargon to wade through with this.
Okay, great. So we are seeing some lenders and financial advisors also coming to LinkedIn to try and clear up some of this confusion on their end. I invite you to come and walk us through a little bit about what you're seeing them saying on LinkedIn.
Yeah, absolutely. So first up, we have Luana from Bank of America, and they're talking about financial institutions may have specific requirements that must be met when applying for funding with your bank support. So this is a really good point. You need to talk through with your individual lender what the exact requirements are. There are certain requirements that come from the federal government as part of this loan program, but because these are being given out by individual lenders, you really just want to make sure that you understand exactly what the terms are and what you're agreeing to before you sign on the dotted line. Next up, we have Gary, and he is a financial advisor in Pasadena, and he's talking about the way to apply is specifically through your lender. And Wells Fargo, when he left this message, was not accepting applications yet, and they had some certain terms surrounding whether or not applicants were already existing customers with them. Now, this is something that we saw a lot of on Friday. So, because there is so much interest in these loans, many banks are requiring that business owners have a prior relationship with them before accepting their application. That's not true for every lender, so it's worth checking with the person that you are already banking with or with another lender to see if they are able to accept your application.
Okay, Jordan, thank you. I think that we're seeing a lot of questions in the stream already. I think it's a great time to bring in Mike Malloy, our guest. He is an adjunct professor at Georgetown and runs a startup incubator. Mike is going to come in and join us. And Mike, welcome. Welcome to Business Unusual. Looks like we're having a little trouble.
Happy to be here this morning. Good morning, good afternoon.
Great, thank you so much. Real quick, if you're just joining us, this is Business Unusual. It is LinkedIn's live show where we discuss the way coronavirus is impacting the way we work. Today, we are talking about a very timely topic, very practical, I hope, for a lot of you joining us, which is the small business loans. And how the heck do you figure this out? What are they? How can you apply? What's going to happen? We have Jordan Dahl, who is the LinkedIn small business editor, and Mike Malloy here joining us. He is a professor at Georgetown University who also runs a startup incubator and has been researching this a lot. I'm going to step backstage for a few minutes and let Jordan and Mike chat. I'm going to look at some of the comments that are coming in the stream and come back in a few moments because there are already a lot of questions pouring in. So I'm going to let you two take it away. Thank you.
Thanks, Susie. Hi, Mike. Thanks for joining us.
Hi, Jordan. Happy to be here.
As we've seen from the comments and from the lenders themselves, there seems to be a lot of confusion around where people can go to apply, what they need. What can you tell us in terms of where business owners should start in putting together an application?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I've got my second monitor up here with my notes, so I'll glance over there.
Great.
So as you mentioned, there's two types of loans that small businesses can apply for. The EIDL is the Economic Injury Disaster Loan. That's the first place I recommend everybody start. And you can go to covid19relief.sba.gov. No hyphens or anything. And on the SBA website, you apply right there for this loan. Now, it's important to note that this loan is not forgivable. It is something you'd have to pay back. However, by applying for the loan, you're also eligible for the $10,000 grant. So immediately you can get $10,000 of basically free money from the government while they work out reviewing your application and how much of a loan you're eligible for. And small businesses with less than 500 employees are eligible for up to $2 million in loans, with the interest rate capped at 3.75%. Once you get that submitted, and that's something you apply directly through the SBA online, the next place to go is the Paycheck Protection Program, the PPP loan. So this loan was designed by the SBA and the CARES Act and will actually be underwritten by your local lenders, your local banks that already give out SBA 7A loans, which is kind of an existing SBA program. And so by talking to the banks that your business currently works with, that's the best place to get the PPP loan, especially if you have a small business lender you have a personal relationship with. There are some banks that are not certified SBA lenders, and therefore you won't be able to get the loans from them. There are also a lot of banks, as we mentioned, want you to have a pre-existing relationship, but you don't have to have a pre-existing relationship with all banks. I've heard that M&T Bank in particular is a great bank to go to if you need a new bank for this loan. And to get ready for the loan application, there's a few documents you need to have put together. First is your tax returns from the past 3 years. If you haven't done your 2019 taxes yet, that's okay. You've got an extension through July 15th. But prior years that you've been in business, you want to have your tax returns as well as your payroll tax reports. So that's Form 941 from the past 4 quarters, as well as your 1099s for contractors from last year. You'll also want to be prepared with a current financial statement, kind of your income statement as of the end of Q1, March 31st. How is your company looking financially? And you need to be prepared to show kind of your articles of incorporation, the basic formation business documents, as well as information about any individual or entities that own 20% or more of the business.
Great. So, and then in terms of timeliness, it sounds like people really need to get on these ASAP. Is that correct?
Absolutely. Time is of the essence. There is a big pie of money. We've got $350 billion, but there's also believe more than 30 million small businesses in the US that are kind of competing for these funds. In particular, with the EIDL grants, they have allocated $10 billion to give 1 million companies this $10,000 grant. 1 million out of 30 million small businesses, which means you got to be in the first 3% of companies that are applying online on the SBA's website in order to receive that $10,000 grant, which you won't have to pay back. It's just designed to help you kind of weather these challenging times while you wait to hear back on the full EIDL loan application. There is a larger bucket of money available for the PPP program. I believe they've got up to $10 million is the max loan you can get. And the initial interest rate is just going to be 0.5%. And for the PPP, they will calculate how big of a loan you can get based on your average monthly payroll for the previous 12 months. And so this is one place there's been some ambiguity with banks, and the underwriting isn't completely clear. It may be the previous 12 months from April 1st, 2019 to March 31st, 2020, or it may be January 1st to December 31st of 2019. I'd have all of those numbers prepared and just be able to walk into the bank and actually have a link to an Excel calculator that you can download to kind of fill out, hey, what was our payroll expenses each month, figure out what the average payroll you had over that 12-month period is, and then you get to multiply that by 2.5. So they're basically offering you 2.5 months of payroll in order to help weather the storm and ideally keep your employees on payroll and with your company. The government does not want you to have to lay off people because of these challenging economic times. I work as the program director at the Halcyon Incubator with a lot of social entrepreneurs, people that are building companies that want to have a positive impact and want to be able to pay their employees. So we've worked deeply on how to, make sure that even if the revenue is not coming as you thought you would have been getting before COVID-19, how can you keep your team together and be able to afford to keep them with your team?
Great. Awesome. Susie, let's go to the thread. What kind of comments are we getting?
We are getting a lot of questions. Jordan and Mike, thank you. I'm gonna ask a couple at a time so we can make sure that we get to them all. We have a question, same question from Lamont, from Josh. First one I'll ask is, can you apply for both of these programs or only one? And then the second question I want to ask is about timing. We have David and James and Diego all saying that they were able to fill out these applications on Friday, but they haven't heard much. Maybe they've gotten a response back saying we've confirmed that you've applied, but they don't know what to expect. Is it 3 days? When are they supposed to hear something? So question one is, can you apply for both programs or only one? And question two is timing. If you have applied already, what should you be anticipating?
So I can answer the second question, and Mike, I'm going to kick it over to you for the first. In terms of timing, banks have been completely overwhelmed with applications, and so they are taking a bit longer to go through them than usual, than expected. The other aspect of this is that some of the regulations have been changing. So the interest rate was actually increased to 1% on Thursday or Friday of last week. And some banks are still working out the regulations with the feds. So you should be hearing back soon, but it will require a little bit of patience. And Mike, in terms of how many loans, you had a really great breakdown of that in your document. What do you advise?
I advise applying for both of them, and as quickly as possible. I would start with the EIDL. And one thing to note is if you get both of them and for some reason you don't need or want all of the money, you don't have to take it. You're applying, you're hoping to get approved for as large an amount as possible. But if things turn around, and you don't need to take both the loans, you can still get the $10,000 grant from the EIDL. The other thing to note is that if you get both the loans, you can't use the money from both loans to pay one person's paycheck because it's possible for the PPP loan to be forgiven. So you get this large amount of money for 2.5 months of payroll. Any money you spend in the first 2 months on payroll, rent, mortgages, or utilities can be forgiven. You'll need to document to the government, hey, here's the payroll expenses I had, here's who I paid our rent to, the utilities bills. You can't then also go to the EIDL loan and say, hey, look, I paid these people's payrolls with this as well. You need to kind of keep those two separate. To recap, I would recommend applying for both. You don't get ruled out from one because you got the other.
Great. Susie, what else are people asking us?
Great. We have a lot of people asking a version of this question, which is, are these loans for small businesses only or also for people who are self-employed or sole proprietors? We are hearing from Liza, who's saying that she tried for the Paycheck Protection program, but there was no box to check for sole proprietor, which she finds insane and really frustrating and wants to understand what's going on there. Evelyn wants to know, how does this work for a home-based business? Lori wants to know, can nonprofits apply for the PPP or just the EIDL? So a lot of questions. Over to you. Are these loans just for small businesses or also for people who are self-employed, sole proprietors, or nonprofits?
Mike, you want to grab that one?
Yeah, I can take this. So the short answer is these loans are available for almost everybody we just covered. I actually work for a nonprofit, Halcyon, and Halcyon's applying for both of these loans. We'll be able to use it to help us keep our payroll and staff to be able to keep supporting entrepreneurs and artists. And then for sole proprietorship, I believe that means you're filing your income on your Schedule C on your personal tax return. So as long as you've had the business operational before February 15th of this year, you can apply for the Paycheck Protection Program. Your salary will be determined by your net profit from last year. And if you have previous years, basically 3 years of tax returns, however long since you've been in business for your LLC or sole proprietorship. And another thing to note is if you run a sole proprietorship informally with your spouse, you can only apply for the PPP once. Both you and your spouse couldn't both apply for it. And it's basically preventing double dipping there. And then, yeah, hopefully that answered the question. And again, for nonprofits as well, definitely eligible for both of these programs. And I believe the interest rate for the EIDL is slightly lower for nonprofits, as long as you have less than 500 employees.
Great. Thanks, Mike. Susie, what else is going on in the stream? What else are people asking us?
A lot of questions around. Mike, I think you were just saying that like one application per person. So you're talking about a case of a married couple. What about, James wants to know, can I apply at multiple banks and just take the first one that gets back to me?
I don't think so. I think you've got to pick one bank and put your application in with them. And that also will decrease the number of times that the number of applications total being submitted and reviewed. Yeah, I would pick one bank, probably the one you have the longest or best relationship with. I think you're going to get the same interest rate from other banks. It's not like you're trying to get a mortgage on a house and you want to shop it around to get the best rate. So just pick one bank and stick with them.
Great advice.
Okay, I'm looking at the stream here. It's fast and furious still. We have a few people wondering, with all the shifts in employment in the last couple of weeks, couple of months, business owners want to know if they've had to furlough or lay off or not pay their employees, if something funny is going on with their payroll, something atypical, are they still eligible to apply?
Yes, they are still eligible to apply. The goal of the Payment Protection Program is actually to increase or to keep your employment steady. And so if you have already laid off workers, you can bring them back. That is actually kind of the point of the program. It's for you to keep those workers on your payroll and give you the funds in order to do that. Mike, is there anything I'm missing? Anything to add on that?
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head. The whole goal is to be able to continue to make your payroll. And if people have been laid off, you have until June 30th of this year to add them back onto the payroll. And that way the loan can be forgiven. If, let's say, you had 20 employees and you cut it down to 10 or 5 employees, you won't be able to get as much of the loan forgiven, which means you'll have to pay it back. I think you might still be eligible to get the loan amount, but recognizing that it's no longer kind of free money that doesn't need to be paid back if you have downsized your organization, because we want to kind of use these funds to decrease unemployment.
Yeah, exactly.
Great. Bill in the stream, he is wondering, he applied for the disaster loan and he says the process did not ask him how much money he was applying for. So Bill and some other people in the stream want to understand, how is it determined how much money that they will receive?
I'm honestly not sure the answer to that question. I think that will vary on a case-by-case basis. And for the EIDL loans, that's all going through the SBA. I know the maximum amount is $2 million, but I'm not sure how they're going to calculate each case by case, how big of a loan.
Okay, great. Let me take one or two more here from the stream. Keep them coming. If you still have questions that Mike and Jordan haven't answered yet, we definitely have time for some more. Let's see. We've got.
One thing I'd like to ask, Susie, real quick. Mike, in your document, you had great resources for business owners in Virginia and Maryland and DC about local programs and local grants that they would be available for. Do you have any kind of advice for the business owner in Nebraska, Kansas, Louisiana, wherever else about how they can find their own programs in their own state?
Yeah, absolutely. I have a link to a Google Sheet that's broken out by every state in the US with available programs that have been announced thus far. I believe we'll be able to share that afterwards in the recap article and in the comments. And the other thing is, quite honestly, Googling. Go on Google once a week, search if there's any new things that have been announced. Some state governments are a little bit slower than others and are also trying to see what other states are doing, that's working well. I know Maryland has about $130 million in funding for local small businesses. I haven't memorized every state. I've looked at Georgia and Pennsylvania and Virginia and DC. But yeah, there's more things coming out, and I do have a list that I can share, and I'll make sure Jordan has it to post after the fact, as well as a list to all of the small business or the SBA banks in each state. So that's also really important. If you don't bank with a current SBA lender, you need to find a new one. And my guidance there would not be to go to the Wells Fargo or the Bank of America in your state, which I'm sure is there, but to pick a small community bank that you can build a relationship with. This is in some sense going to be more of a personal lending, like, hey, do I trust you to have a good relationship, even though you haven't banked with us for the past several years? Hey, we want to move our business over here. We know this is important to getting through this challenging time, is having access to the PPP funding. So be prepared to build some rapport and create relationships with new banks if your previous banks are not SBA lenders.
Great. I see a lot of questions in the stream that we've already answered, but the good news is, everyone watching, this broadcast will be available for you to watch after we're done. You can rewind, play those parts over and over and over about whatever the specific question you have in terms of eligibility. I'm seeing a lot of the same questions about payroll, who's working, who's not. Does that affect eligibility? Seeing a lot of questions about what to expect in terms of timing after you are able to apply for all the loans. Just a couple more quick ones, Mike. Sandra asks, will you qualify if you filed for bankruptcy?
I think it depends when you filed for bankruptcy. I think if a couple years ago you filed for bankruptcy and now you're currently running a different business that's actively operating, you are eligible for the loan. If your business went bankrupt or within the past month or two, I think you might be out of luck. I think you would need to be operating a live and active business. However, if you file for bankruptcy, I want to clarify that that doesn't mean you're not eligible for this. Like, there's no minimum credit score for an individual to apply for this. There's also no personal guarantee or collateral required. So even if you don't have the best banking or credit record, as long as your business is operational, you've got people on payroll, or at least for sole proprietorship or LLC, you've been documenting this on your individual tax returns for the past few years, you're still eligible. So it's been designed to, be welcoming as many people as possible to apply for these loans.
Okay, great. One more question.
I can interject real quick, Susie. A question that came up earlier that I'm not sure we fully answered. There are two different deadlines in terms of when to apply for this loan. So small businesses could start applying and nonprofits could start applying on Friday, April 3rd. Freelancers and contractors cannot begin applying for the PPP loan until April 10th. So I recall there was one woman who wasn't able to apply or couldn't check a box, and that may have been what was going on there. Just to clarify.
That's great clarification, Jordan. I'm sure that person really appreciates that. I've lost her name in the comments here, but yes. The last question I have for you, Mike, from the stream is, David is wondering, if you hire 1099 contractors, are they covered in the PPP?
So 1099 contractors are not technically payrolled employees. That's, before all this happened, one of the benefits of paying people via 1099, and think folks in the gig economy like Lyft drivers and things like that. They are not technically on your payroll, and therefore you won't be able to get a PPP loan to be able to pay their 1099 contracts over the next couple of months, and that won't be forgiven as part of the loan. You may still be able to get funding from the EIDL that you could use to pay them, but that would be a loan and something that you as a business owner would need to be prepared to pay back over time.
Okay, and as we are wrapping up with you, Mike, let's just remind everyone one more time, what are the two loans, who can apply for them, and when?
Yeah, so the two loans are the EIDL, which stands for Economic Injury Disaster Loan, and that's from the SBA. You go to covid19relief.sba.gov, or even if you just Google SBA loan, I'm sure it'll show up at the top of the list. That's the one I recommend applying for first. Just by applying, you immediately become eligible for a $10,000 grant that does not need to get paid back, isn't part of the loan, and then you can hear back in a couple of weeks about how much of the loan you're eligible for from the SBA. The second loan is PPP, which stands for Paycheck Protection Program. It's designed to protect your paychecks and payroll and the employees that you pay them to by offering you 2.5 times your average monthly payroll from the past year. So basically giving you a couple months worth of paychecks that you can then issue to your employees. And these are full-time employees that are obviously still working for you. It's also designed where if you had to let some people go because you're tight on cash and just couldn't make payroll, that, hey, if you get this loan, which can be up to $10 million, by the way. So for bigger companies, as long as they have less than 500 employees, they qualify as a small business. The PPP loan is a great way to get the capital to be able to not only make payroll, but also your rent payments, your mortgage payments, and any utility payments. And any money in the next 2 months, and by next 2 months, I mean from the date the loan is originated, you've got 2 months. Any of that loan that you use for payroll, rent, mortgage, or utilities will be forgiven by the bank that wrote the loan. It's insured by the SBA, and basically you won't have to pay that back. So they're really trying to help you get through these challenging times and keep your employees provided for as well.
Okay, so we had some of these open up to people on Friday, and then Jordan, you're telling me that April 10th is the next date, and who is that date for?
That is going to be for freelancers and for independent contractors. So one quick clarification on the forgiveness aspect. The SBA issued new guidance because they are getting so much interest in the PPP loans. They are saying that up to 25% of your loan amount can be for for mortgage payments, for utilities, and for rent, that will be forgiven. So you can take out a loan to pay your mortgage, your rent, and your utilities, but only 25% of the total forgivable amount can go towards those costs.
Okay, great. And April 10th was for self-employed
freelancers and contractors.
Freelancers and contractors. Okay.
Could I add one thing to Jordan's point too on the mortgage is that this is an opportunity too to talk to whoever owns the property and just ask for an extension. You know, maybe you don't need to use this loan to pay your mortgage or your rent. Maybe you can have an upfront conversation about the challenging economic circumstances, and is there a way to at least defer a couple months of payments? Stretch things out to when there's more cash flowing into the business. It's in the landlord's best interest for you to not go bankrupt and still be able to operate your business, and especially if you've got a multi-year lease. So I want to encourage business owners as well to think about, who can you negotiate terms with? If you had net 30 terms, can you get net 60 or net 90? Everybody's struggling today, and I think people are much more understanding. It's nice that it's not just your business that's facing this or your industry. Every business in every industry is going through this. And all the small businesses are kind of interconnected, working together to support one another through it.
Okay, and last point to recap, what about timing? For people who already started to apply for these things on Friday when it opened, after they start to apply on April 10th, if they're in that category, how long should they expect to wait until they hear something?
I think it depends. I don't have the best answer. I think different banks are going to be able to process these loans at different rates. For the EIDL, you should expect to hear something in like 3 to 10 days about the grant. You'll put your email in there. They'll be able to email you an update on when the $10,000 grant can be awarded. The SBA's phone number, in my post too, I've got a couple phone numbers for the SBA available. If you want to follow up on the EIDL, you can give them a call. Certainly save your loan application number and everything. And the same thing for the PPP. I would give it at least a week. I'm not expecting the money to just show up on Tuesday if you applied on Friday. But I would be surprised if by the end of April, if you applied Friday or even this week, like I'd get your application in as soon as possible so that hopefully by the end of April, you receive the funding in order to make April payroll. And I would also check in at least once a week with your bank and find somebody in there who can give you a fast answer and be responsive. But hey, what's the timeline looking? Even if they're saying, hey, no updates, you at least want to know what's going on back there and what they're processing.
Okay, so that's great for people to realize that banks are overwhelmed. They're trying as fast as they can to catch up to all this new stuff themselves. If you haven't heard back in a few days, there's nothing wrong yet. Keep checking in, keeping a greasy wheel with your lenders, but there's no set time right now where you should definitely have heard back that it's happening or not. Just be patient, keep checking in, know that you've filled everything out, you're doing the right thing, and just be patient with the process. But as Mike said, just keep checking in with those people throughout the week, the weeks, the months, build that relationship up. That should pay dividends in the future as well. Mike, Jordan, thank you so much for joining us. Mike, I think you helped a lot of people in the stream. I want to remind everyone that if we didn't get to your particular question, that you can go back and watch this broadcast again after. You can rewind, you can go over the bits that are complicated that apply to you. We saw a lot of questions in similar buckets. We tried to recap those about timing, who can apply and when. Keep talking to each other in the comments. There's a lot of help and support you can find through other people going through the same process with these same questions as well. But Mike, thank you so much for joining us today.
Yeah, thank you for having me. It's a pleasure. And any questions or comments, folks, feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn, send me a message. I'm more than happy to follow up. And I know, Jordan, you're going to post a bunch of great resources and things. We're all in this together. So as long as we keep helping one another, I think we're going to weather the storm and hopefully come out even stronger.
That's so great, Michael. Thank you.
Thanks, Mike.
And Jordan, I know you're going to continue reporting across this. Can members follow you? What can they expect to see from you? What kind of questions do you want to hear from them?
Absolutely. I've been covering this kind of from day one of the pandemic, and I will continue to do so for small businesses. I have a weekly newsletter that goes out on Tuesday that I've turned into a resource guide for business owners with the latest news coming out around the pandemic, what resources might be available to them. And I'm also linking to other people. So Mike's document can be found there. I'm also going to be posting that here in the comments once we wrap up here. Definitely follow Mike. Follow up with him and ask him some questions. You can also email me or comment on my posts, and I will get back to as many as I can.
Thank you so much, Jordan. Everyone, that's Jordan with a Y, Jordyn, doll. Go find her on LinkedIn, follow her. She is going to be staying across this for you throughout this whole thing until the very end. Jordan, thank you for joining me.
Thanks, Susie.
And thank you to all of you. We had a lot of great questions today. I hope that we were able to answer them in a way that is helpful to you. We are here, Business Unusual, 4 days a week. Actually, this is our fifth. This will be 5 shows this week, coming to you from the LinkedIn editors page at noon Eastern. Please tune back in tomorrow. My co-host, Caroline Fairchild, will be talking about this crisis as seen through the lens of a small town. It's actually a small town she is from. Tune in tomorrow to hear what that is like with Caroline. As always, thank you for joining us. Thank you for your comments. Keep using the hashtag Business Unusual to tell us what you're thinking, what you want to hear from the show. Thanks for being with us, and stay safe out there.